The year was 2247, and humanity had finally received an answer to its oldest question. They were not alone in the universe. Admiral Daniel Hayes stood on the command deck of the starship Valiant, watching the main screen with tired eyes. He had been awake for nearly 20 hours, but sleep was the last thing on his mind. 3 massive alien vessels had appeared near Jupiter just 6 hours ago, and the entire human fleet was on high alert. The alien ships were beautiful in a strange way. They were made of silver metal that seemed to glow with violet light. Each ship was at least 10 times larger than any human vessel. They hung in space like sleeping giants, silent and patient. "Sir, we are receiving a transmission," said Lieutenant Commander Lisa Morgan from her station. She was a young officer with sharp eyes and a calm voice. Nothing seemed to shake her, but even she looked nervous now. "Put it through," Hayes ordered. The screen flickered and an image appeared. The creature on the screen was tall and thin, with pale blue skin and 4 arms. Its eyes were large and completely black, like pools of ink. It wore robes of white and gold, and it spoke in a voice that was cold and flat. "Greetings, species designation, human. I am Ambassador Zyrith of the Valoran Dominion. I speak on behalf of the Galactic Council, a coalition of 17 spacefaring species that has governed this region of space for over 40,000 years. Hayes felt his stomach tighten. 40,000 years. Humanity had only been in space for a few centuries. The ambassador continued. "You have achieved faster-than-light travel. This triggers our automatic inclusion protocols. The Galactic Council welcomes you. A delegation will arrive in your solar system within 30 of your planetary rotations. Prepare your leaders for integration processing." The transmission ended. The screen went dark. Lisa turned to the Admiral. "Integration processing. That does not sound like an invitation, sir. That sounds like a demand." Hayes nodded slowly. He had noticed the same thing. The alien had not asked if humans wanted to join. It had simply told them what would happen. There was no choice offered, no discussion suggested. "Send this recording to Earth Command," Hayes said. "Every word. I want the President and the United Nations Council informed within the hour. This is not a first contact situation anymore. This is something else entirely." On Earth, the news spread quickly. Within days, every person on the planet knew that aliens were real and that they were coming. Some people celebrated. Others panicked. Most simply waited, unsure of what to feel. President Andrew Carter was a tall man with gray hair and a calm face. He had led his country through difficult times before, but nothing had prepared him for this. He called an emergency meeting in the secure bunker beneath the mountains of Colorado. The room was filled with scientists, military officers, diplomats, and advisors from every nation on Earth. Dr. Kevin Wright was the first to speak. He was the lead expert on languages and communication, and he had spent the last 2 weeks studying every detail of the alien message. "The language patterns are very clear," he said, pointing to the screen behind him. "This is not a request. Every phrase they used implies expectation of obedience. They did not ask us to join their council. They told us we would be integrated. There is a big difference." Secretary of Defense Nicole Barrett leaned forward. She was a serious woman who had spent her entire life in the military. "So, what you are saying is that this is not diplomacy. This is a summons." "Yes," Dr. Wright replied. "That is exactly what I am saying." The room fell silent. Everyone understood what this meant. The aliens were not coming to make friends. They were coming to take control. General Scott Palmer stood up. He was an older man with a scarred face and hard eyes. He had fought in wars on 3 continents, and he knew what conquest looked like. "I have been studying every piece of information we have about these aliens," he said. We have intercepted some of their communications over the years. We have data from old probes and satellites. The pattern is always the same. When a new species is discovered, the Council sends a delegation. They offer protection and trade in exchange for complete submission. The new species gives up its military, its weapons, and its freedom. A council governor is installed on their homeworld. Within a few generations, the species loses its culture, its identity, and eventually its will to resist. President Carter's face was grim. "You are saying they want to turn us into slaves." "Not slaves in the traditional sense," Palmer replied. "But yes, something close to it. We would become a resource for them. Our people, our planet, our technology. All of it would belong to the Council." The president stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the mountains rose against the sky, ancient and unmoved by the troubles of humanity. He thought about all the generations who had come before, all the struggles and sacrifices that had brought humanity to this moment. What are options? He asked quietly. General Palmer took a deep breath. "We can submit. We can sign whatever papers they put in front of us and hope they treat us fairly. Or we can refuse. And if we refuse, then they will try to destroy us." The room was silent for a long moment. Everyone knew the truth. The alien ships were bigger, faster, and more powerful than anything humanity had ever built. In a straight fight, humans would lose. But Nicole Barrett spoke up, her voice firm. "Their technology is advanced, but it is not perfect. Our analysts have found weaknesses. Their shields are strong, but they have gaps. Their weapons are powerful, but slow. And most importantly, they have never faced an enemy who was willing to die rather than surrender." President Carter turned back to face the room. His eyes moved from face to face, seeing the fear and the determination that mixed together in everyone present. "We have 30 days, he said. 30 days to prepare for whatever comes next. I want every factory working around the clock. I want every scientist focused on finding ways to fight back. I want every soldier ready to defend our home." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was hard as iron. "Humanity has faced extinction before. We have survived ice ages and plagues and wars that nearly destroyed us. We did not come this far to kneel before strangers who think they can take everything we have built. If they want to fight, we will give them one they will never forget." The meeting ended, and the work began. All across Earth, people started preparing for the storm that was coming. They did not know if they could win. But they knew one thing for certain: they would not go quietly. 30 days passed faster than anyone expected. The world had changed in ways both visible and invisible. Factories that once made cars now made weapons. Universities that once taught philosophy now taught survival. Every nation on Earth had set aside its differences to focus on the single greatest challenge humanity had ever faced. And now the aliens were here. 3 sleek shuttles descended through the clouds over Geneva, their violet engines humming with strange energy. Thousands of people had gathered to watch from a safe distance, held back by soldiers and barriers. Cameras broadcast the event to every corner of the planet. Every television, every phone, every screen showed the same image: humanity's first face-to-face meeting with beings from another world. Secretary General Laura Bennett stood at the front of the human delegation. She was a woman in her 50s with silver hair and steady hands. She had spent her whole life in diplomacy, negotiating peace between nations that had hated each other for centuries. But this was different. This was not about borders or resources. This was about the future of the entire human race. The shuttle doors opened with a soft hiss, and the aliens emerged. Ambassador Zyrith was taller than Laura had expected. He stood nearly 8 feet tall, his forearms folded across his chest. His black eyes scanned the crowd with an expression that might have been curiosity or contempt. It was impossible to tell. Behind him came two other species. The first were the Chrythani, insect-like creatures with hard shells and clicking mandibles. They moved in quick, jerky motions, their many eyes reflecting the sunlight. The second were the Mortith, massive beings with skin like gray stone and faces that showed no emotion at all. Armed guards surrounded the delegation, carrying weapons that glowed with contained energy. The message was clear. The council was not here to ask. They were here to tell. Laura stepped forward and extended her hand in greeting, the universal human gesture of peace and friendship. Ambassador Zyrith looked at her hand for a moment, then looked away as if she had offered him something unpleasant. "We are here to formalize your integration into the Galactic Council," he announced. His voice was loud enough for everyone to hear. "You will sign the standard compliance accords. Your military vessels will be taken apart. Your weapons research will stop. A governing body appointed by the Council will be installed on your planet to oversee your development." Lavra kept her face calm. "And what do we receive in return?" "You receive protection from hostile species. You receive limited access to trade routes. You receive the guidance of civilizations far older and wiser than your own." One of the Chrythani delegates stepped forward. Its mandibles clicked rapidly as it spoke, and a device on its chest translated the sounds into human language. "You should be grateful, young species. Many worlds would beg for such an offer. You are being given a gift." Lavra took a slow breath. "And if we wish to discuss these terms? To negotiate?" The Chrythani made a sound that the translator rendered as laughter. "Negotiate? Young species do not negotiate. You comply, or you are marked as hostile. Hostile species are removed." The word hung in the air like smoke. Removed, not defeated. Not conquered, removed, as if an entire civilization was nothing more than a stain to be wiped clean. General Scott Palmer stood among the human delegation, his hands clasped behind his back. He had spent the last month studying everything humanity knew about the Council. He had read reports about other species that had been integrated over the millennia. The Therians, who had been a proud and artistic people before the Council took their world. Now they served as laborers and entertainers, their culture nearly forgotten. The Valkith, who had resisted integration and been hunted to near extinction. Their surviving members lived on reservation planets, watched over by Council guards. This was not protection. This was conquest with a polite smile. The formal meeting moved inside to a great hall that had been prepared for the occasion. Long tables had been set up, covered with documents and translation devices. The compliance accords were displayed on holographic screens. Page after page of rules and restrictions that would strip humanity of everything that made it human. Ambassador Zyrith sat at the head of the Council delegation, his forearms resting on the table. "We will give you 1 day to review the documents," he said. "Tomorrow morning, your Secretary General will sign them in front of your people. This is how it has always been done. This is how it will be done now." Lavra nodded politely. "We will review everything carefully." That night, in a secure bunker deep beneath the Swiss Alps, the real meeting took place. President Carter was there, along with leaders from every major nation. Military commanders, scientists, and diplomats filled the room, their faces grim in the dim light. "They are not even pretending anymore," said Nicole Barrett. "They want our planet, our resources, and our people. The protection they offer is protection from themselves." Dr. Kevin Wright nodded. "I have analyzed the compliance accords in detail. If we sign, we lose control of our own solar system within 5 years. Within 20 years, we lose the right to govern ourselves. Within 50 years, we will be nothing more than a footnote in their history." President Carter looked around the room. "So our choice is submission or war?" "Yes," said General Palmer. "And if we choose war, We will be fighting an enemy that has thousands of years of experience and technology we cannot match." The room fell silent. Everyone understood the odds. The Council had never lost a war of integration. Every species that had resisted had been crushed. But then Laura Bennett spoke. Her voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the room. "When I was a child," she said, "my grandmother told me stories about the old wars, about times when our people faced enemies who seemed impossible to defeat. She told me that the spirit of humanity is not found in our weapons or our technology. It is found in our refusal to accept defeat, in our ability to stand up when everyone tells us to stay down." She looked at the faces around her. "The Council thinks we are children. They think we will be too afraid to refuse. They think we will beg for their mercy. But they do not know us. They do not know what we are capable of when our backs are against the wall." President Carter stood up. His voice was steady. "Then we are in agreement. Tomorrow, we will give them our answer. And whatever comes after, we will face it together." The meeting ended. The leaders returned to their rooms to sleep, though few of them would find rest that night. Outside, the stars burned cold and distant in the black sky. Somewhere among them, the Council fleet waited. They expected surrender. They expected compliance. They were about to learn that they had made a terrible mistake. The Council fleet arrived 3 days later. They did not come with 3 ships this time. They came with 40-7. Admiral Daniel Hayes stood on the bridge of the Valiant, watching the enemy vessels appear on his screen one by one. Each flash of light marked another warship dropping out of hyperspace, taking position in the darkness between Mars and Earth. The ships were enormous, their silver hulls gleaming with weapons that could burn entire cities to ash in seconds. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Morgan worked at her station, her fingers flying over the controls. 47 confirmed enemy vessels, sir. 12 heavy cruisers, 23 destroyers, 8 carriers, and 4 command ships. Hayes nodded slowly. The human fleet had 31 ships. They were smaller, weaker, and carried weapons that the Council considered primitive. But they had something the Council did not understand. They had people who were willing to die for their home. The communication system crackled, and Ambassador Zirith's voice filled the bridge. "This is your final opportunity. Surrender now, and only your military leadership will be executed. Your civilian population will be spared for labor allocation. You have 1 hour to respond." Hayes looked around at his crew. These were the best men and women humanity had to offer. Scientists, soldiers, engineers, and pilots who had trained their entire lives for moments like this. They were afraid. He could see it in their eyes. But beneath the fear was something stronger. "Transmit our response," Hayes ordered. Lisa pressed a button, sending a single word to the enemy fleet on all frequencies. No. The first wave of Council ships began to move forward, their weapons charging with visible energy. The battle for the solar system had begun. Commander Ryan Mitchell led the first attack group, a squadron of fast assault drones that screamed through space at impossible speeds. He was a young pilot with quick reflexes and a fearless heart. His parents had been killed in an accident when he was a child, and he had spent his whole life searching for something worth dying for. Now he had found it. "All units, target their shield generators," he commanded through his radio. Human intelligence identified weak points in their cycling patterns. "We have a 3-second window every 30 seconds. Do not waste your shots." The drones split apart, weaving through the enemy formation like angry insects. Council weapons fired, filling space with deadly beams of energy. 3 human drones exploded in the first volley, then 5 more. But the survivors pressed on, launching their missiles at precisely calculated moments. The first, the Lauren cruiser shuddered as explosions tore through its shields. Secondary blasts ripped across its hull, sending pieces of metal spinning into the void. The great ship listed to one side, smoke and fire pouring from a dozen wounds. On the surface of Earth's moon, massive weapons hidden beneath the gray dust came to life. These were rail cannons, simple in concept but devastating in execution. They used electromagnetic force to launch chunks of metal at a fraction of the speed of light. The Council had never faced weapons like these. Their shields were designed to absorb energy, not deflect solid objects traveling at thousands of kilometers per second. When the first salvo struck the Mortith flagship, the result was catastrophic. The giant stone-skinned ship broke apart like a toy hit by a hammer. Pieces of it scattered across space, tumbling end over end in the silence of the void. Admiral Zyrith watched from his command ship, his forearms gripping the railing before him. His black eyes were wide with something he had not felt in centuries: fear. "This is impossible," he whispered. "They are primitives. How are they doing this?" The battle raged for hours. Human ships darted through the enemy formation, striking and retreating, using their speed and agility to avoid the powerful but slow Council weapons. Council ships fell one by one, their crews unprepared for an enemy that fought with such desperate fury. Captain Amanda Clark commanded the destroyer Relentless, a small ship with a crew of just 40. She had been a captain for only 2 years, but she had earned the respect of every person under her command. When she gave an order, people followed it without question. Her ship had taken heavy damage in the first hour of fighting. The hull was breached in 3 places. Life support was failing. Half her crew was dead or wounded. But she refused to retreat. Navigation set a collision course for the Krithani carrier, she ordered calmly. Her first officer, a young man named Peter, looked at her with shock. "Captain, that will destroy us. I know." She turned to face her crew, the handful who remained at their posts. "Anyone who wants to leave, get to the escape pods now. I will not order anyone to die with me." No one moved. Peter swallowed hard and turned back to his console. "Course set, Captain." Amanda smiled. It was a sad smile, but also peaceful. "It has been an honor serving with all of you." The Relentless accelerated toward the enemy carrier, its damaged engine screaming with effort. Council weapons fired at it, scoring hits that tore away chunks of armor and destroyed systems. But the ship kept coming. At the last moment, Amanda opened a channel to the entire human fleet. "Remember us," she said. Then the Relentless struck the carrier at full speed. The explosion was visible from Earth. The battle lasted 7 hours in total. When it was finally over, 23 Council ships had been destroyed or disabled. The survivors were in full retreat, their engines straining to reach the hyperspace boundary. The human fleet had paid a terrible price. 17 ships lost. Over 3,000 men and women dead. But they had won. Admiral Hayes watched the enemy flee on his screen. His face was wet with tears for the fallen, but his heart burned with fierce pride. "Get me a channel to Earth," he said quietly. A moment later, his face appeared on screens across the planet. Billions of people who had been holding their breath finally released it. "The enemy is retreating," Hayes announced. "The solar system is secure. We have lost many brave men and women today, and we will honor their sacrifice forever. But let the galaxy know this: humanity will not be conquered. Humanity will not be ruled. And anyone who threatens our home will pay a price they cannot imagine." Across Earth, people began to cheer. They hugged each other and cried and laughed. They had faced the impossible and survived. The Council had come to crush them. Instead, they had created something far more dangerous. They had created a legend. The morning sun rose over Geneva, painting the mountains in shades of gold and pink. It was a beautiful day, the kind of day that made people stop and appreciate the simple wonder of being alive. But no one was thinking about the beauty of the sunrise. Every eye on Earth was fixed on the Great Hall where the signing ceremony would take place. Inside the hall, hundreds of people had gathered. Diplomats and journalists filled the seats, their faces tense with anticipation. Cameras floated through the air on small drones, capturing every angle. The broadcast was being watched by 9 billion people across the planet and on colonies throughout the solar system. Ambassador Zyrith stood at the podium, his forearms clasped behind his back. The other council delegates sat behind him, their alien faces unreadable. On a large holographic screen, the compliance accords glowed in soft blue light. Ready to be signed, Secretary General Laura Bennett walked slowly toward the signing platform. She wore a simple black suit, her silver hair pulled back from her face. In her hand, she carried a stylus that would record her signature and make it legally binding under council law. The hall was completely silent. No one spoke. No one even seemed to breathe. Laura reached the platform and looked down at the document displayed before her. She had read every word of it the night before. She knew exactly what it demanded. The surrender of human military forces, the end of weapons research, the installation of council governors on Earth and every human colony, the slow, steady erasure of everything humanity had built. She picked up the stylus. Ambassador Zyrith allowed himself a small smile. He had done this dozens of times before with dozens of species. The young ones always hesitated at the last moment, but they always signed. Fear was a powerful motivator, and the council had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of using it. Laura looked at the stylus in her hand. She thought about her grandmother's stories. She thought about her children and grandchildren. She thought about all the generations yet to come, the humans who had not yet been born, but who would inherit whatever decision she made today. She set down the stylus. The hall went completely still. Ambassador Zyrith's smile faded. His black eyes narrowed. Laura turned to face the cameras, to face the billions of people watching across the world and beyond. On behalf of the people of Earth, she said, her voice clear and strong, we decline. For a moment, nothing happened. The word hung in the air like a stone thrown into still water. Then the ripples began. Ambassador Zyrith stepped forward, his forearms unfolding. Decline? This is not possible. No species declines. It has never happened. Laura turned to face him. It is happening now. The Krythani delegate surged forward, its mandibles clicking in fury. You foolish creatures. You do not understand what you are doing. The Council has destroyed civilizations that were ancient when your species was still living in caves. Then, you have never faced a species with nothing to lose. Laura replied calmly. Ambassador Zyrith's voice turned cold as ice in deep space. You are making a mistake that will cost you everything. Your planet. Your people. Your very existence. General Scott Palmer stepped forward, positioning himself between the alien and the Secretary General. His hand rested on the weapon at his side, though he knew it would be useless against the Council guards and their advanced technology. Maybe, he said, but it will be our mistake to make. Not yours. The ambassador stared at him for a long moment. Then he turned to his fellow delegates and spoke in his own language. The translators did not convert his words, but the tone was clear. Anger, disbelief, and beneath it all, something that might have been fear. When he turned back to face the humans, his expression had hardened into something terrible. You have chosen war, he said. The Galactic Council will respond accordingly. You have one of your planetary rotations to reconsider. After that, your species will be designated hostile, and you will be dealt with as all hostile species are dealt with. He turned and walked toward the exit, his robes flowing behind him. The other delegates followed, their guards forming a protective circle around them. At the door, Zirith paused and looked back one final time. "One day," he said. "Use it wisely." Then they were gone. For a moment, the hall remained silent. Then someone began to clap. A single person, somewhere in the back of the room. Another joined in. Then another. And another. Within seconds, the entire hall was filled with applause. People were standing, cheering, some of them crying. Lavra Bennett stood at the podium, watching the reactions spread across the faces of her fellow humans. She felt tears in her own eyes, but she held them back. There would be time for tears later. Now there was work to do. On Earth, the news spread instantly. People poured into the streets in every city on the planet. Some were afraid. Some were angry. But most were something else entirely. They were proud. For the first time in history, humanity had stood before a power greater than itself and refused to bow. Within hours, the war machine began to move. Factories that had been preparing in secret now shifted to full production. Shipyards launched vessels that had been built in hidden docks beneath the oceans and on the dark side of the moon. Soldiers who had been training for this moment put on their uniforms and reported for duty. President Carter addressed the world from the ruined steps of a monument that had stood for centuries, a symbol of human achievement and determination. "Today we made a choice," he said. "We chose freedom over safety. We chose dignity over survival. We chose to stand as humans have always stood when faced with tyranny, together and on our feet." He paused, his eyes sweeping across the crowd before him and the billions watching on screens around the world. "The Council believes we are weak because we are young. They believe we will break because we are afraid. But they are wrong. Humanity does not break. We have faced ice ages and plagues and wars that nearly destroyed us. We have always survived. We have always grown stronger." His voice rose, filling the air with fierce determination. "They are coming to conquer us. Let them come. They will find that Earth is not a world of slaves. Earth is a world of warriors. And we will fight for every inch of our home until the last human draws their final breath." The crowd roared. Across the planet, people raised their fists and shouted defiance at the stars. The Council had expected surrender. Instead, they had awakened something they did not understand. Humanity was going to war. News of the Battle of Sol spread through the galaxy faster than light itself. Within days, every spacefaring civilization in the Orion Arm had heard the story. A young species, barely a century into their time among the stars, had done what no one else had ever done. They had said no to the Galactic Council, and they had survived. For the 17 species of the Council, the news was devastating. For 40,000 years, they had ruled this corner of the universe without challenge. Younger species submitted or were destroyed. That was the natural order of things. That was how it had always been taught. Until now. Ambassador Zirith returned to the Council's capital world in disgrace. His fleet had been shattered, his reputation ruined. The Valaran Dominion, once the most respected voice on the Council, now faced difficult questions from its allies. "How did this happen?" demanded the High Speaker of the Krithani Collective. "You told us the humans would submit like all the others. Instead, they destroyed nearly half our enforcement fleet." Zirith had no answer. He had underestimated the humans. He had seen their small ships and primitive weapons and assumed they would be easy to conquer. He had not understood that the humans were not fighting for territory or resources. They were fighting for something far more dangerous. They were fighting for their freedom. On Earth, the days after the battle were filled with both grief and celebration. Memorial services honored the fallen, their names carved into monuments that would stand forever. Admiral Hayes spoke at a ceremony in Geneva, his voice heavy with emotion. "These men and women gave everything so that we could remain free," he said. "Captain Amanda Clark and her crew. the pilots of the first attack squadron, the gunners on Luna Station. They knew they might not survive, and they fought anyway. That is the spirit of humanity. That is what the Council could not understand and could never defeat. But there was no time for rest. The Council would return. Everyone knew it. The only question was when. President Carter worked around the clock, directing the rebuilding effort. Shipyards operated at full capacity, replacing the vessels lost in battle. Scientists studied the wreckage of Council ships, searching for new technologies that could be adapted for human use. Soldiers trained harder than ever before, preparing for the next fight. And then something unexpected happened. 6 weeks after the battle, a single ship appeared at the edge of human space. It was small, barely larger than a personal transport, and it carried no weapons. It transmitted a simple message in a language that human computers could barely translate. "We come in peace. We wish to speak with your leaders." The ship was Therian. The Therians were a species that had been under Council control for 8,000 years. Once, they had been a proud and creative people, known throughout the galaxy for their art and music. Now they served the Council as laborers and servants. Their culture nearly forgotten. Dr. Kevin Wright was chosen to meet with the Therian delegation. He had become humanity's unofficial ambassador, the person who spoke to other species on Earth's behalf. He met the visitors in a secure facility in northern Canada, far from any population centers. The Therian, who stepped off the ship, was a graceful being with feathered wings and eyes like liquid gold. Her name was Vela, and she was old even by her species' long-lived standards. She had been alive when her people still remembered freedom. Kevin bowed his head in greeting. "Welcome to Earth. We are honored by your visit." Vela smiled, an expression that same as all species. "The honor is ours. We have watched your people from afar for many years. We saw your defiance. We saw your courage. And we knew we had to come." "Why?" Kevin asked. "The Council will punish you for contacting us." "Perhaps. But some things are worth the risk." Vela's golden eyes gleamed with an emotion that Kevin recognized: hope. "For 8,000 years, my people have lived under the Council's rule. We forgot what it meant to be free. We forgot that we could be more than servants. But your species reminded us." She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You showed us that the Council can be beaten. You showed us that freedom is worth fighting for. And you are not alone in hearing that message." In the weeks that followed, more ships arrived. Not Council warships, but small vessels from the edges of known space. Species that had been conquered, subjugated, or pushed aside by the Council. Species that had given up hope long ago. The Vulkith came, survivors of a species that had been nearly wiped out for resisting integration. Only a few thousand remained, living on scattered colony ships. The Marani came, a peaceful people who had been forced to work in Council mining operations for centuries. The Jandari came, warriors who had once been feared throughout the galaxy, but who had been broken by Council conquest 3,000 years ago. They all came with the same question: "Will you lead us?" General Scott Palmer met with their military commanders, sharing tactics and strategies. Dr. Michelle Torres coordinated their scientists, combining knowledge from dozens of civilizations. Secretary General Laura Bennett spoke with their diplomats, building the framework for a new alliance. And Kevin Wright sat with Vela one evening, watching the sunset from a balcony overlooking the mountains. "Why us?" he asked. "We are the youngest species in this part of the galaxy. We have the least experience, the smallest fleet, the most primitive technology. Why look to humanity for leadership?" Vela was quiet for a moment, her feathered wings rustling in the breeze. "Because you have something the rest of us lost long ago. You have the fire, the belief that you can change things, even when everyone says you cannot. The willingness to fight even when victory seems impossible. She turned to face him, her golden eyes bright with emotion. The council has ruled for 40,000 years because no one believed they could be challenged. You proved that belief wrong. You lit a spark that cannot be put out. And now that spark is spreading. Kevin looked out at the gathering darkness, at the stars beginning to appear in the sky. Somewhere among them, the council was preparing for their next move. Somewhere among them, new allies were making their way toward Earth. Then we will fight together, he said. And we will win together. Vela nodded, a smile crossing her alien features. Together. That is a word my people had almost forgotten. Thank you for reminding us what it means. The Galactic Council had expected humanity to submit and disappear into history like all the others. Instead, they had created their greatest enemy. Not just a single defiant species, but a movement. A coalition of the forgotten and the oppressed. A rebellion. And it was only the beginning. In the darkness between the stars, something new was being born. Something that would change the galaxy forever. Hope.